And with that, we are live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 32 of the TechForge podcast. I am your host, Dynamo Ned, and I am joined by my ever faithful co-host, Mr. Jason.
Did you actually hit the button?
Yes, I did hit the button.
No, you didn't hit the button. It says we're live.
Okay. If that's the way you want to play it, okay.
Yes, sir. Howdy.
Unfortunately, our friend Hunter is a bit under the weather this week, and so he was unable to join us. So he is here in spirit, but could not be here for the actual podcast.
May the faithful Protoss belly always be here with us.
Indeed. So, this week, honestly, the tech news has been kind of light this week. Yep. Well, unless you're a fan of mobile devices, but we don't really talk about mobile that much on this show. And that's usually Hunter's department when we do. So, we will not be discussing the Samsung Galaxy 10 too much this week. Perhaps next week. No, this week we've got, well, kind of a grab bag of things from all over the tech world. Several interesting moves by Intel. Some more leaks from NVIDIA on their GeForce GTX 1600 series. And some leaks about AMD Ryzen 3000. A potential release date for Navi. And some additional information about X570 motherboards. So let's get right to it. We'll start with a few Intel stories. And this first one comes from Tech PowerUp. Intel acquires Indian startup to strengthen position in discrete GPU tech. According to this article from Tech PowerUp, it was several years ago that a small startup from Hyderabad, India.
Hyderabad. That's how it's pronounced.
Okay. Inida made headlines because it was designing custom-designed processors for use in wearable devices with very high energy efficiency. Well, this is the same company that Intel has acquired to help them with their positioning in their discrete GPU tech for reasons that should be kind of obvious. Because they have a lot of experience in designing highly efficient GPUs and CPUs, particularly for use in mobile devices. So if Intel wants to scale their mobile tech all the way down to mobile devices, then having that kind of expertise on tap, it can only be a benefit.
Well, it looks like this company has been given contracts from some big players, man. Samsung, Qualcomm are listed. So,
yeah, Imagination Technologies.
Yeah. And they make custom design processors. So it sounds like they're processors that are designed for specific tasks. Interesting.
And with energy efficiency basically being the number one constraint in modern computing, particularly when it comes to graphics performance, then having that kind of expertise on tap, particularly with a house that is an expert at custom fab designs, can only be a benefit in the long term. Let's see. They make mention.
Yeah, they make. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
They make mention in the article about how NVIDIA found this out the hard way.
Oh yeah, with the 480.
Yeah, with the GTX 480. Yep. I remember the Fermi.
Oh yeah, I think it was power hungry, man.
I did not have the means to get a GTX 480 at the time. But I did get the follow-up GTX 570, which fixed some of those problems. But that still was a hot card.
That was still Fermi based, wasn't it?
Oh, it was Fermi based, but they re-engineered the cooler and they made some efficiency tweaks that improved performance, but still made it kind of hot and loud. Uh, well, yeah, I had a GTX 560 Ti 448 core, which was basically a GTX 570 with an additional streaming multi-processing unit disabled.
Okay. SIMD. So in the article, this is interesting. They mentioned that the Anita Systems founder has a tie-in with Raja Koduri. So I wonder where they worked together at.
It says here that the founder of Anita Systems used to be the managing director for AMD India.
Okay, I missed that part.
Yep. So that's where he has his in with Raja, most likely.
Which also potentially gives him a background in GPUs.
Exactly. So it looks like the continual acquisition of brain power by Intel is ramping up, and none too soon, because they're looking to release their first iterations of their XE or Z or G processors. They haven't really told us how they want that pronounced yet. But they're looking to get those out sometime into this year, beginning of next year. So,
well, with this acquisition, so this team from Anita Systems it says here that they're experienced with SoC or system on chip architectures. So that should help with building discrete GPUs, considering that part of that architecture includes a memory controller. So that'll be interesting.
and given Intel's focus, in particular with their CPUs, on their Foveros technology, where they have the modularity of having different parts on different process nodes using a single substrate.
Oh, is that where they showed that stacking technology that they have?
Yes.
That's pretty interesting.
So, given that is something that facilitates SoC designs, that type of technology, we could see some of that possibly coming to their GPUs as well.
I'm really looking forward to these GPUs, man.
Yeah, having another competitor in the market can only be good in the long term.
Absolutely. I'm not expecting super high end, but I'm just hoping that they're priced reasonably well, and they cause a little shakeup in the market.
Indeed. All right. So next article is also an Intel article, this one from a non-tech. And I originally saw this article when Ian Koutras posted it to his Twitter page. And he posted it with a slightly different picture from the one that's currently on a non-tech. The original picture had what looked like a Intel mainstream CPU sitting in a bucket of KFC chicken.
Well, yeah, it's because of the KFC in the model name, dude.
Right.
Kentucky Fried Intel.
And so
little country fried gravy there. What?
So this is apparently a new processor that was recently listed in ADA 64 called the Intel Core i9 9900 KFC. Hence the Intel playing chicken part of the title.
That country gravy looks pretty good in that pic, man.
Yeah, I can't lie. So this particular processor, though, is currently unannounced from Intel. They have announced the 9900K and even the 9900KF, but they have not announced a 9900KFC.
I wonder what this thing is going to be all about.
Now, It's interesting that the 9900KF has been mentioned. The last time Intel used the letter C to designate a CPU, though,
Broadwell.
was back with Broadwell with their Crystal Well processors. The Core i5 5575C and the Core i7 5775C. Basically, both of those parts were standard Broadwell processors with integrated graphics, but they included a 128 megabyte EDRAM level 4 cache, which essentially acted as a buffer between main memory and the internal cache on the CPU die. Now, that produced some interesting results for those Broadwell CPUs. In particular, it made their onboard graphics on par or faster than the AMD APUs of the same time period, even though they used the same memory technology. They were both on DDR3 at the time.
I can't imagine a high speed level 4 cache on this on a KF variant, what that would be like.
Yeah, because the whole point of the F variant is that it doesn't have integrated graphics on it.
Right. Which
And
means
so,
that TDP, you know what I mean? Like you wouldn't, well, not that most users who get the 9900K or KF would, you know, or the 9900K would be using the IGP all that much unless they're using some kind of content creation workload that would benefit from it. But
yeah, some kind of Adobe Premiere Quick Sync or
yeah,
something along those lines.
which that is what it would be great for. KFC. I don't even see a KF listed on Newegg. Are they even released yet?
Technically they are, but they've apparently been really slow to get to the sales channel. They're mostly being directed to OEMs. And so Ian reached out to Intel for further clarification on this particular part. But so far, they have not received any.
Man.
Still, the idea of a 9900 KFC, I'm afraid our chicken fried dreams of an Intel CPU will have to wait.
Well, before you know it, we're going to have 7 nanometer Ryzen. Man, this thing is still $530, man.
The Intel KF variant?
Just the K.
I was going to say, technically the KF has been listed, but the 9900 KF, the last time it was available, was $582.
Jeez.
So you were paying $50 more to get no graphics.
Right.
Which kind of defeats the point.
Fine, I'll get the K. If you're going to be like that.
I mean, I remember back in the Ivy Bridge days, the Core i5 3350P. That was back when the P denoted that it had the graphics removed. The 3350P was a really popular part for some people because it was relatively cheap. It was cheaper than the 3470 and a whole lot cheaper than the 3570K. But it had similar performance to a stock 3570K. And with a little fiddling with the base clock, you could crank it right on up there.
Well, that's back when i5s performed similarly to i7s in games.
Right.
That's changed quite a bit.
Yeah, back before you needed more than 4 threads at a time.
Yeah, back when 4 threads or less was fine. You know.
Yeah, I have a Dell Optiplex 3220 that I got off a Facebook deal that has a Core i5 4590 in it. Solid part, but only having 4 cores and 4 threads, in some games, it's really obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Because some games, if you turn the resolution up just a little bit too high, you wind up with a stutter fest.
Yeah, and even in the 6-threaded i5s now, it's better, but it's still not as good as a hyper-threaded part or something with SMT on it. So
right.
That's where the Ryzen 5s are kind of taking the cake right now.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, I follow Keith from WCCF Tech. Keith May. He had a test bench with an i5 8600K, and he started seeing games where the 8600K was becoming a bottleneck, particularly for the high-end RTX cards he was testing. And so he had to move. Even though he had trouble getting it ordered, he ordered a 9900K just so that he could remove the CPU bottleneck for his testing purposes. And that's with a 6-core 6-thread part that's overclockable.
Yeah, that's kind of sad actually when you think about it, because for the longest time, that used to be like the go-to mainstream part was an i5, especially a K variant, because yeah, they were a little pricey, but they performed just as well as the hyper-threaded i7 in games, and you could not worry about bottlenecking a high-end GPU with it.
Oh yeah, I remember the heyday of when the 2500K literally ruled the benchmark charts.
Oh yeah.
And, I mean, I still have a Core i7 2600K system with an RX 480 in it that does just fine gaming at 1080p. And I'm sure if I were to throw a more powerful GPU in there, there'd be a little bit of bottlenecking at 1440. Because, well, the 2600K can only clock up reliably up to about 4.4 on air cooling.
Mm-hmm.
That's the highest I've ever been able to get this one up to. Most of the time I run it at 4.2 because I know it doesn't have the most powerful cooler on it. And so, I mean, unfortunately, the time of the i5s, I think, has come and gone. At
Unless
least
they
if you're
make a
gaming,
change. Go ahead.
unless you're gaming at solely 1080p. And even then, if you want to game at anything higher, you're kind of out of luck.
Might as well go with the Ryzen 5.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you will see slightly lower frame performance, but you will likely see better frame time performance.
You will. Because of 12 threads.
And speaking of Intel versus AMD in the budget space, AMD has been kind of unchallenged for several months in the budget space with their $55 Athlon 200 GE. Well, Intel wasn't going to take that lying down, so they are now introducing a new Pentium variant, the G5620. Now, this CPU, according to TechSpot, is set to release in March, and it's part of Intel's new line of Pentium Gold CPUs.
Pentium Gold.
The top of the list is the G5620, a dual-core hyper-threaded chip that will launch with a 4 gigahertz clock speed. It's expected to retail for right around $100, which to me says Intel thinks this part will perform on par with not the Athlon 200 GE, but the Ryzen 3 2200G.
I don't know.
Well, I'm just saying, given Intel's pricing, that's what they think. I'm with you. I don't think a hyper-threaded dual core is going to perform as well as a true quad core. But on the other hand, Intel does have a clock speed and IPC advantage, an ever smaller one than ever. But
Well, they've got a clock speed advantage. IPC is about the same.
I could
They're
say
at parity. Actually,
it's ever thinner than it has ever been.
I would disagree. I mean, we can agree to disagree. I'm cool with that, but they're at IPC parity pretty much. They do have a clock speed advantage, though. That's for sure.
Yeah, Intel does have that slight clock speed and efficiency advantage, but again, that margin is ever slimming.
Yeah, we'll see about the summer.
And so the 5620, you know, to me, the 5620 is probably something that Intel needed in their lineup because if you remember, there was the previous generation, the Pentium G5400 that came out with the 8th gen parts, but it just could not compete against the likes of the 200GE or the 2200G. And the last part we had that Intel produced that was truly competitive in the budget space was the Pentium G4560. And that was the first time they did a dual core hyper-threaded part, but that was almost 3 years ago. And so, however, the 5620 will not be alone in its product stack. There will also be the G5420, a 3.8 gigahertz part, the G5600T, which is a 35 watt, 3.3 gigahertz part, and the 5420T, which is a 3.2 gigahertz, 35 watt TDP part, along with 3 new Celeron SKUs, the 4950G, or the G4950, the G4930, and the G4930T, which are all standard dual cores without hyper-threading.
I guess it's good to see them kind of revamping the lower end of their product stack, but I just don't see much to get excited about. I mean, the same article states that the Athlon 200GE, which is what, 50 or 60 bucks or whatever, routinely beats the i3-8100 in some CPU tests, and the i3-8100 is a quad core, I think, and obviously it's going to beat it in integrated graphics tests with the Vega core, but still, I don't know. And the Athlon 200GE is less than half the price, so
right,
more than half the price. Anyway,
yeah, the 200GE is right around $50 to $55, and even the higher clocked, higher performing 240GE is still only right around $60 to $65. So Intel pricing this right at $100. Yeah, expect performance slightly less than the i3-8100, but honestly, in the budget space right now, you really can't go wrong with AMD.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't see much. I think the best value right now is the 2200G, honestly, if you're looking at something in this space, because then at least you still get a quad core and you get some gaming chops at 720 to 1080p, depending on how you tune it.
Yeah, should have included this in the show notes, but unfortunately I didn't. Coming back to Keith May from WCCF Tech, did an excellent video where of course, he was on the Ryzen 5 2400G, but he ran Apex Legends 1080p low to medium settings on just the 2400G.
Nice. I haven't seen much on Apex Legends. I mean, I've got to download it. I haven't played it yet. Is it like an esports title? I mean, I don't know anything about it.
Well, it's a battle royale game,
Okay.
but it's team-based, and it's like if you took elements from PUBG, Fortnite, Overwatch, and used the Titanfall engine to power it all.
Okay. Titanfall does have a good engine.
A lot of the movement is Titanfall-esque. It's set in the Titanfall universe, but there's no Titans, and you don't have the wall running and like mechanics, but you do still have the movement mechanics, the melee mechanics, and the grapple and zipline stuff. So,
well, if I remember right, the Titanfall engine was pretty responsive and pretty fluid and quick.
it is, and from what I've seen about the game, you generally is too. Unfortunately, my main system refuses to install EA's Origin because apparently, even though I have every version of Visual C++ currently available on Microsoft Windows 10, apparently none of them are the right one.
Oh, no.
So,
It's
EA fix Origin.
Yeah. That's a bummer.
All right. So let's see. Oh, yes. This is one I wanted to talk about in particular because my favorite mouse of all time was the Logitech MX518.
It's a good mouse.
Well, Logitech is bringing it back. They are bringing back an updated version of the MX518 for 2019 with an upgraded sensor, onboard memory, but the same wonderful shape that I so enjoyed on the MX518.
I can't believe it came out 12 years ago.
Yeah, the original MX518 came out 12 years ago. And I played and used mine till I wore it out. I used it till the switches wouldn't switch anymore.
It's got decent specs, man.
And the price is not that bad either. I remember the original MX518 was like something on the order of nearly $100. This is available for pre-order for $60.
It makes it pretty competitive, actually.
It's using a Hero 16K sensor, which has a resolution anywhere from 100 to 16,000 DPI.
It's crazy.
And it apparently has responsiveness up to 400 plus IPS, or what they call inches per second. Meaning that can detect movement up to 400 inches per second.
That's insane precision.
Apparently, it comes with 5 pre-selected DPI settings that you can use by using the DPI switch buttons of 400, 800, 1600, 3200, and 6400. But of course, with the Logitech keyboard and mouse software, you can reset those.
Their gaming line's always been good.
And thankfully, if you are one of those people who just cannot stand the craze that is the rainbow vomit we all call RGB, you'll be happy to know that this comes in the classic black Nightfall pattern. So if you want to maintain the sanctity of your RGB-less desktop, then this is an excellent mouse to do so.
Maintain the sanctity. That's hilarious.
Hey, I know some people who absolutely want their entire machine. They just want it, what's the appropriate term? Murdered out black.
That's all cool in the game, man.
I mean, I generally don't go a whole lot for the RGB, just enough that, I have a nice soft glow for my system. But then again, mine's a solid red, so
There
there's a reason I call it Crimson Phoenix.
you go.
So yes, I am glad the MX518 is back. I used the original MX510 and the MX518. I'm so glad they are coming back because
Yeah.
I've been looking for a mouse for years to kind of replace them. Kind of the closest I ever got is the one I'm using now, which is the Rocat Cone Pure.
That sounds can you show it again? That sounds very Ricat Cone Pure. That sounds I can't tell if that sounds French. That's a good looking mouse though.
It's German, actually.
Ah. Nice.
But yeah, there's other mice I've been experimenting with. Let's see if I can reach this one.
I've got a Steel Series 300 for mine. Rival 300. I like it.
This is another one I've been experimenting with. This is the Cooler Master CM310.
It's a nice looking mouse.
I got it on sale for $10, but it is a solid mouse up to 10,000 DPI.
Nice.
It does have the RGBs.
Right there on the...
Yeah, right here on the palm. So it does have the RGBs, but it's pretty subtle. And it does have that kind of shape I like. I'm a palm gripper.
Mm-hmm.
So it does have that very MX518-ish grip that I like. But with Logitech finally bringing back the MX518, perhaps I won't have to search for a mouse any longer.
It's not a bad deal for a gaming mouse, actually.
Yeah. For $60, you can spend significantly more than that on a solid gaming mouse.
Easily 100 and 150 bucks.
Yeah, particularly if it has the R word in the front of it.
Mm-hmm. R.
Let's see. Oh, here we go. So this one, I originally was going to make it a topic, but this is really kind of an amalgamation of a lot of smaller stories. So I just decided to tackle it with this one big kind of amalgam story from WCCF Tech. And it's about the recent leaks surrounding AMD Ryzen 3000, Radeon Navi, and the X570 motherboards from AMD. So this is a combination of reports from Video Card Z, Red Gaming Tech, and a couple of others that WCCF Tech has kindly condensed and put together. So according to the sources from Red Gaming Tech, the Radeon 7 got its release on the 2nd of February because it is Vega 2 on the 7-nanometer process. And so apparently, to keep up with this theme, AMD is planning to release all of its AMD mainstream processor families, and I say processor specifically because I'm talking about CPU and GPU families, on July the 7th, or 7/7, to emphasize the 7-nanometer, because marketing.
Yeah.
And so, apparently, the rumor mill is currently saying that Computex 2019 is when AMD will initially announce these new CPUs and GPUs, with the actual release on July the 7th.
Nice. Sticking with the 7 nanometer theme, or the 7. So there's a lot of anticipation.
Yes.
A lot of anticipation.
Uh,
For pretty much all of this stuff. Not so much the motherboards, but definitely Ryzen, definitely Navi.
so let me share this photo. All right, here we go. And so this is an unofficial timeline from Planet 3D Now that's compiled from a set of leaks they received. Notice it has some of this we know has already come to fruition. Notice the Ryzen 3000U and 3000H processors named Picasso. We talked about last week how there's already an Asus notebook that uses the Ryzen 5 3350H that's out on the market at roughly the $700 price point. So that's already come to fruition. Apparently, according to this leak, the Ryzen 3000G and 3000GE processors, which will likely be the Ryzen 3s and the Athlons, are supposed to be coming out in Q2. And those, again, will be Zen Plus CPUs, not Zen 2. So they will be on a 12 nanometer process. And then around June, July, we should see Ryzen 3000, Epic 2, and Threadripper 3000. Rome, Matisse, and Castle Peak, respectively, which have the 7 nanometer CPU cores and 14 nanometer IO cores. So, with that in mind, that also gives us some launch dates potentially for some other products.
Well, when you put that into perspective in the CPU line, I think Intel's expecting their next core update to be in October. I'm not sure if that's going to be on a new node or not. But that gives AMD, what, 3 months?
More or less.
Interesting.
So if this particular chart based on a number of leaks is accurate, we could see those third-gen Ryzen desktop processors sooner rather than later. And we could see some of the lower-end parts even sooner, as soon as April.
Well, the 3000G and 3000GE I wonder if those are going to be, so they're saying, oh, they're saying APU desktop, huh?
Yeah, so apparently those are going to be the successors to the 2200G and the 2400G.
Okay.
And again, since those are going to be based on the same process architecture as the current 2000 series, and they're going to be Zen Plus CPUs, those will be on the 12 nanometer process.
Mm-hmm.
So it would make sense for them to release them before the 7 nanometer ones.
Wonder if they'll update the graphics part.
It's a good question.
Interesting. Well, the Vega graphics in the 2200G and the 2400G are pretty respectable for IGP, you know. So.
Right, and remember they're currently built on the 14 nanometer process.
Mm-hmm.
So we should see probably a 5 to 10% uplift by moving to 12 nanometer. And to accompany these new CPUs will be the new X570 chipset. X570 does bring a few interesting upgrades over X470. In particular, the X570 platform will be all PCIe Gen 4, which from a connector and mechanical perspective doesn't bring any change over PCIe Gen 3. PCI Express is still PCI Express. But it means we will see roughly a doubling of bandwidth available for GPUs and anything else that you have on that PCIe bus, which, remember, now includes NVMe SSDs.
Well, I don't think we'll see much of an improvement in performance for GPUs, at least not with current and maybe near current architectural design. What it could mean, though, is more performance improvement for SSDs if there are controllers out there that will take advantage of the increased bandwidth.
Indeed.
Especially if they haven't changed the PCIe multiplier. You know, for example, they're still staying at X4. That would be double the bandwidth. So,
right, PCIe with PCIe 4.0 versus 3.0, you know, PCIe 4.0 would be the same as PCIe 3 times 8.
Which that could be very interesting.
And keep in mind that there is significant motherboard manufacturers have been quoted as saying that they are expecting 12 and 16 core parts on X570. So we'll likely see a beefed up power phases in VRM compared to X370 and X470, which actually might give me a reason to upgrade my motherboard.
Well, if you've got a good
X370,
if you've got a good X370 or X470 motherboard, I mean higher end, like Crosshair or like the Tai Chi or a Gaming 7 kind of a thing, you should have the VRM chops to be able to handle a 12, maybe even a 16 core.
Yeah, perhaps, but I'm running a Gigabyte Gaming AX370 Gaming K5.
Ah, okay.
So maybe not. We'll have to see. I mean, it handles my 1800X just fine, but you know, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I understand.
I mean, at worst, I can just pull my 1800X off there, or I don't know. We'll just have to see. It'll really depend on what the Ryzen 3000 CPUs bring to the table. If they bring 16 cores to the mainstream, then yeah, that might be a reason for me to look to upgrading my platform.
Well, you want a good VRM for that thing.
Yeah.
Because honestly, that's the entire reason I upgraded from the X470 Aorus Ultra Gaming to the Gaming 7 was VRM. On the 2700X, because the VRM would just get way too hot on that other motherboard for my liking. Now it could handle a 2700 just fine, or anything less, but the 2700X in some workloads, man, especially if you run it on Precision Boost Overdrive, the voltages just go out of the roof, man. Like that thing is a VRM killer. And there's a big difference in VRM. once you go up into the higher end of the X470 or X370 motherboards, those VRMs are very beefy. So, yeah, I can definitely understand.
Of course, the other recent upgrade that I might have around that time would be the new Radeon Navi GPUs. Or at least, possibly, since the original July 7th release date has rumored to have been pushed back to Q4 of this year.
Well, we're getting various conflicting information
This is
regarding the
true.
potential Navi release. I mean, it's been pushed back and pushed back. It's been pushed back over a year now. So I really hope they release in July.
Yeah, because I think if they wait much longer than that, their window against NVIDIA will have largely closed. Because, let's face it, right now, the reason, as displeased as people are with the RTX cards, and as much of a failure as DLSS and real-time ray tracing have been, and yes, I call them a failure because right now there's literally 2 or 3 games that implement those features, and in all of them, implementing them and turning them on significantly degrades your performance.
And RTX has been very, very slow to sell. So,
but if NVIDIA is given long enough where they're really the only option at the high end on the market, then... And the RTX 2060 seems to be the outlier in that, yes, it's more expensive than other 60 series parts have been in the past, but that $350 price point seems to be palatable enough for a significant number of people who have been waiting 2.5, 3 years for a GPU upgrade.
yeah. And it's you can't knock it for performance. I mean, regardless of that 6 gig frame buffer, which I think is really its Achilles heel, it's got the performance. I mean, it's equal to a slightly overclocked Vega 56 or a 1070. I think even it's probably right at parity with a 1070 Ti. So,
yep, and so the 2060 is a pretty decent option for what it is, even though it is a bit overpriced compared to parts from previous generations.
it's basically maybe slightly cheaper, but you're basically paying for performance from 2 to 3 years ago at that price point.
Yeah. A video I watched recently put it well. Instead of a price drop, you're getting tensor cores.
Yeah. Right.
And maybe that'll pan out. But I think NVIDIA realizes that the RTX series has not sold well because it is priced so high and because its signature features in the RTX lineup have largely fallen flat in their initial implementations. When DLSS is called Vaseline on your screen by a number of prominent tech outlets, and real-time ray tracing cuts your performance in half in a given game. Now, admittedly, it's a little bit better in Metro Exodus. It doesn't have nearly that performance impact, but it still does in Battlefield 5. It's to say I'm a little bit disappointed with NVIDIA would be an understatement. But I think they realize that because they are working to get this new GTX 1660 and 1660 Ti out to the public. which
Well, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
is kind of the other things I wanted to talk about this evening, particularly the release date, which when you all are watching this on February the 22nd, if you're watching it on day of release, supposedly the 1660 Ti is supposed to release today as you're watching, tomorrow as we're recording this.
Ah, right. Right. I was going to say. Well, on a closing note with that, we know that, well, we can be fairly confident that X570 is going to be solid. Ryzen 3000 is going to be very good. If we're looking at, the past two Ryzen releases. Navi needs to come out at 2070 or better performance for $250. If the high-end Navi can do that, then they'll have success and they'll completely blow the market wide open.
Right, and we could see a price war in the GPU market again.
Which is what we need. And that's what AMD needs to wake people back up and to get a win.
I would agree. And so, NVIDIA is not going to take it lying down, though, and that's why they are prepping the GTX 1600 series, which, according to the information that's currently out there, the 1660 Ti will be releasing today, as you all are watching this. Today being February the 22nd. We're recording this the night before, though. And the 1660 Ti, there have been a number of leaks on its specs, on its performance, and a number of other things. So this first article we'll be looking at is from PC Games In. Of course, given the source, take it with a grain of salt, but they're largely compiling things from other sources, and we will also include links in the description down below to a number of other sources that produce similar or have similar information, including Tech Radar, WCCF Tech, Video Card Z, what have you. So, the 1660 Ti, we've talked about its vital stats before. It's based on the Turing TU-116 GPU. It has 1,536 CUDA cores. It's based on new 12-nanometer silicon from NVIDIA that they contracted out from TSMC. And it does not have the RT and tensor cores of its RTX brethren. So, with all that said, there have been a number of leaks about its performance.
Mm-hmm.
So, the first leak is from 3D Mark Time Spy, which of course is a synthetic benchmark. And apparently, the GPU scored roughly 6,200, between 6,228 and 6,274 in the Time Spy benchmark, which is a DirectX 12 benchmark. Kind of the successor to Firestrike, as it were. Again, it's a synthetic, but that's roughly on par with what the GTX 1070 was capable of. So a GTX 1070 class card that, according to rumor, is going to be right around $250.
Well, from what they're saying, they're expecting MSRP to be around $279. So,
yeah, of course, that's based on a UK listing that had it for roughly £286. So obviously, with overclocked versions, we'll probably see some of these that push north of $300. At that point, though, you're within spitting distance of the RTX 2060, which actually may be NVIDIA's entire strategy. push people close enough to where, well, if I'm going to buy this $320, GTX 1660 Ti, I might as well get the $350 RTX 2060, which there are actually a few at that MSRP.
Yeah, they're hard to find though. Most of them are around 370, 380.
That's true.
I'm baffled still by the 6 gigabytes of frame buffer. I mean, the GPU itself is going to be plenty powerful. I mean, it's only got right around 1500 or 1600 CUDA cores, but those are Turing CUDA cores, which are actually more powerful clock for clock than Pascal was. But just that 6 gig frame buffer. I just don't know why. At 1080p, you're probably safe for 2019, but
Yeah, I recently acquired a GTX 1060 6 GB. I got a good price on it because it did have a broken fan. I removed the fan and I'm currently running it in a system with only one fan, and it still cools the card just fine.
no, the 1060 is a very good part.
And apparently, this is going to be performing roughly 20 to 25% faster than that. So, at roughly the same price point that you could currently buy a 1060 new.
Yeah, with that, it's kind of hard to argue. I mean, value. But still, RTX 580 or RX 580 at $200 or below is still a better value per frame. I don't know.
There's been some other leaks as well. This one comes from TechRadar, or technically it comes from Toom Apisac, but it's TechRadar doing the reporting. They found Toom Apisac released a Final Fantasy 15 benchmark that showed the GTX 1660 Ti scoring on par with the GTX 1070 and just behind the old Maxwell-based Titan X.
Really?
Yes, the original Titan X during the Maxwell days from about 2015.
Well, that's still a very viable gaming card if you can find a good deal on it.
True, but it does go to show that Maxwell has not received the same kind of support as Pascal, unfortunately. But then again, that is kind of NVIDIA's way with things. They make sure to put most of their focus on the most recent architecture, and so the previous architecture kind of falls off a little bit.
Yeah.
But, hey, it's hard to argue with the 1660 Ti if it is going to be coming in at roughly the same performance as a 1070 at roughly a $280 price point. That would be, given that 1070s were originally released at around, I believe it was a $350 price point.
Mm-hmm.
That is technically value.
Well, 380, but then they jumped up.
Right, because of the cryptocurrency boom.
Mm-hmm.
So technically, yes, you're getting a part that is 3 years later, same performance, but for $100 less. If that doesn't sound as good, but that doesn't sound nearly as good when you put it that way.
Well, still.
Technically, that is value, though.
Yeah, it's more value. Well, it's offering more value than the rest of the RTX line.
Right.
Frame per dollar.
Because let's face it, right now, RTX is still not a technology that's quite ready for prime time. Now, maybe in a year or two, we'll start to see that being implemented more often. But right now, RTX is literally you paying for the future with no guarantee it'll get here.
Yeah, there's no software support. I mean, the main gripe that gamers have, and most people in the tech community, is the price.
Indeed.
So, I mean, $600 for 2070? Come on, seriously? No. No, $400. Okay.
Yeah. Well, apparently the 1660 Ti and its counterpart, the 1660, which, by the way, the 1660 is supposed to come out in March, so roughly a month from now. Apparently, there is another card planned in this 1600 series, and that is the GTX 1650. This is a rumor coming out of Video Card Z, or Video Cards. The GTX 1650 apparently is going to be coming out in late March. There is no word as of yet on its CUDA core count, but based on rumors from AIBs, it supposedly will have 4 gigabytes of GDDR5, a 120-bit, 28-bit memory bus, and an MSRP of roughly $180.
Well, okay, so 1660 Ti CUDA core count will be right around 1536. And then they're expecting the 1660 to be at, 1280, which would put it on par with the current 1060. Just pure CUDA core count. So it's going to be somewhere less than that. I would say it's probably going to be less than 1,000.
Yeah, I would put it like 960, maybe 1024.
Yeah, 1024 might be pushing it, but you never know.
So regardless, well, maybe around 896. 896 would be the logical step down from 1280. If we're going...
I'm guessing performance-wise, that would probably put the 1650 right around an RX 580. Half the texture memory.
Yeah, I mean, it's at that price point, at that performance level, that would put it right around the 1060 RX 580 level.
Yeah, that's what I'm guessing. But it's going to hit a texture memory wall before either of those two cards will. If
this is true,
that is presuming you've got the 8 gig 580 or the 6 gig 1060. So.
So we have some further information from TechSpot about the 1650. Apparently, the card will be featuring a new GPU called TU117, supposedly a cut-down version of TU116. It's supposed to be running at a base clock of 1,485 megahertz and a 4 gigahertz effective memory clock.
Oh, so that would be okay.
And there's not any confirmation on the 1650's TDP, but if it's like the other 50 series cards, since the 750 Ti, they'll probably aim for it to be a 75-watt part. Specifically so, this can be a part that one could easily purchase and stick into a pre-built system without having the need for external PCIe connectors. Or PCI power connectors, I should say.
Which that would make it attractive to quite a few people.
I mean, yes, $180 for such a part would be a bit higher than we've seen in previous generations, but that's been kind of the theme with the entire RTX and now GTX 1600 lineup.
Well, GTX 1050 and 1050 Ti have been around that price point.
Admittedly, yes, but they didn't launch at those price points.
That's true. They're not worth those prices, in my opinion, but
No, but apparently there are people willing to pay that.
yeah.
So,
GeForce tax.
indeed. All right. Well, that is all the news articles for this evening, but we do have a couple of hardware deals. Not as many as last week. This first one, I think, is an absolute no-brainer. This is from Amazon. Let me go ahead and share it. Woo. Okay. Stop that.
What?
I tried to go infinity window.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the Kingston A400 SSD. It is a 240 gigabyte SSD, and you can purchase this SSD for $29.99 with free Prime shipping.
It's not a bad deal.
So for $30, you can have a new drive to act as your boot drive, or if 240 gigabytes is not enough for you, you can upgrade to the 480 gigabyte model for $59.99. And again, $60 for a 480 gigabyte SSD is still a deal.
That's a pretty good looking SSD cover, too.
It's not the fastest SSD in the world. It's only 500 megabytes per second read, 450 megabytes per second write. It's not that great read and write speed, but if you have an older system that's still clunking along on a hard drive for the boot drive, this will be a welcome breath of fresh air to system responsiveness and just the overall usability of your system. Once you've used a system with an SSD for its main boot drive, going back to one with merely a hard drive is like going from a Formula One car to a horse and buggy.
Yeah, it's still a decent boot drive, though. Did
So,
you check out the 960 gig model?
no, but let's take a look. Okay, 112. That's not bad for a 1 terabyte, but for a budget 1 terabyte drive, you can do better.
Yeah. I was laughing at the coupon. There's a 66-cent coupon.
Yeah.
Really, guys? Come on.
Unfortunately, that is temporarily out of stock.
Yeah.
However, the 480 gig model is still in stock, as is the 240 gig model that we started with. I'd say either the 240 or the 480 here are excellent deals, and that's why we're recommending either one of them.
Yep.
Now, this next one, there is a little sticker shock with this one because, well, although we have said multiple times in the past that the RTX series is oftentimes overpriced for what it is, the truth of the matter is there's not really anything else in that performance bracket right now, as most of the 10 series cards are either sold out or you have to get them through the used market, which can be an excellent way to derive value, but can also be a good way to, get yourself beaten, at least in the bartering sense. So we have this deal from Newegg for an RTX 2070 WindForce Edition. Now, this is a gigabyte card, and it has Gigabyte's WindForce cooler. Now, I've used Gigabyte's WindForce cards myself a number of times in the past. I still have, in an older build, a GTX 770 WindForce Edition from 2012. And it's still a solid card that has been very reliable and dependable for me for years. This is the latest iteration of the WindForce cards. And yes, Gigabyte is asking $499 for this card. However, if you get on this sale, which is going through Saturday, February the 23rd, you can get $20 off with promo code EMCTVVU23, which brings the price down to $480, making this one of the cheapest RTX 2070s available. And you also get a free gift of either a copy of Anthem or of Battlefield 5. Now, those are both $60 games. So, in a sense, you're getting an RTX 2070 for $420 after you take into account that $60 of that is going toward a game.
Probably the best deal on a 2070 I've ever seen.
And so, to me, this is a deal, particularly if you're interested in either Anthem or Battlefield 5 and you haven't picked up either of those games yet. This would be a solid way to get one of those games and a card that's going to be able to play those games easily at 1440p. And, well, if you're willing to turn down the graphics settings a little, probably could play them at 4K. But you'd probably have to be doing it like 4K medium.
I was just on the Gigabyte website for Craps and Giggles. They make a water force variant of the 2080.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is everything we have on the agenda. So, Jason, do you have anything else you want to add?
Not really, man. We've covered everything and then some from what I've seen. It's been, kind of a slow tech week, so really don't have much else to add.
Well, hopefully we'll get some additional information once the 1660 Ti is out, which, when y'all are watching this, hopefully it already will be. And so next week we'll have some additional stuff to talk about. And in the meantime, if you've enjoyed the content you've seen here, of course, you can check out some other videos here on our YouTube channel. You can also find us over on Twitch 5 nights a week at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. You can also find links to our Discord community. We have a vibrant one going on over there, as well as our Facebook, our Twitter, and all of our other social media links in the description below. You'll also find links to all the articles we discussed this week. And in the meantime, I've been Dynamo Ned. This has been TechForge. And remember, when life has you down, Jesus loves you, and forge on.